Good afternoon. My name is Alastair Gale. I'm the bureau chief for the Wall Street Journal here in Korea. And we're in a session here. We're going to talk about redefining content and news distribution. You've all heard from Ben Hur at the end there. Great presentation. I have to say that the workload that we've had over the last month covering this very disaster has made me want to move into a job where I can make money out of cat photos. But I think you know all about Ben from his presentation. And then to his left is Eric Alexander, who is the vice president of Flipboard. And these gentlemen run news applications which I have on my phone. I sort of feel like I'm a bit of a dinosaur here because I'm from the old media where we have things like newspapers. So we're going to talk about new media and new ways of distribution. And I thought maybe we could just start off with going back, and Ben, you talked a little bit about this, back to where you saw an opportunity in news distribution and how you approached the problem and how you came up with Circa. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Sure. I have a thesis about how media should work in the new world, and I think actually Flipboard is a great example of that. The thesis is very simple. Every time there is a new device or something that we use to consume content, we must create a format, a type of display of content that fits that environment. So desktop is a very separate, different environment than mobile. Mobile is actually phones plus tablets. Tablets and phones are not the same thing, and therefore you must actually create what you call native content for each one of those types of devices. And when you do that, you actually win. You actually win that content. So imagine shifting from radio to television. You would actually have to change the way you do business and create content because the device is very different. The capabilities of the device are very different.
Right. Yes. We feel that at the Journal now, and I think all of us, you know, in what we call the old media, if you like, are sort of wrestling with this idea of how does our content translate onto the platforms of mobile, which is so important these days. Eric, do you want to talk a bit about how you approached the problem and how you came up with Flipboard?
Yeah, I think for us it was, I think Ben's right. We actually looked at the device first. And for us, the thing that actually brought Flipboard to life was the iPad itself. So at the time, we had heard about this mysterious device that Apple was working on, and we hadn't seen it yet. And we were actually trying to figure out what our product was going to be. And we went through many iterations ranging from a new mobile web browser, and we were kind of all over the map. But when we heard about this touch device called the iPad, we did exactly what Ben said, which is we said, you know what, this is going to change the way that people consume content and read. And so what we really focused on was emulating what we thought the iPad was going to be, and then building a content rendering engine that would take advantage of that display, and something that was tactile. To us, this was the first real device that we thought could really give paper a run for its money, because people know how to touch something and turn a page, and it was very tactile. And that's exactly what we did. To Ben's point, was we designed an application around a device, and we looked at a couple of things. We looked at the way people were consuming content, and what we noticed was a lot more people were getting their content from Facebook, Twitter, and other social networks. So what we tried to do was build a platform that could consume content streams from those social networks, as well as from publishers like yourself, and present it in a really beautiful way that was designed for that screen, not just a simple PDF of the paper, because we didn't think that was the right way to do it. It had to be native to that device. And if we stayed true to ourselves and did it, we felt that we could have a huge success. So that was our approach.
Right, and I was using your application on the way here, and it's kind of recreated the feeling that people like of, as you say, flicking through content, and almost like the magazine experience, which is something that those of us in the sort of traditional media have struggled. And as you say, Ben, it's like, how do you deliver the content on an entirely different platform? You know, we are experimenting with ideas about how to do this. You know, of course, people like the New York Times do that. Is there anyone that you see in the kind of old media space who is getting it, or is it basically a lost cause when it comes to the, you know, the traditional media? Have they failed in this, and it really needs guys like yourself to reinvent the wheel, as it were?
There's a book, great book called Innovator's Dilemma, and it actually describes exactly the industry that we're going through today, which is you end up with a technology platform like Flipboard figuring out what a great experience it is to read the New York Times, right? And so the transition from one technology to another is rarely accompanied by the incumbent. And the incumbent usually ends up using cash to acquire the talent. And so you actually work for a News Corp, which has done a lot of spending over the last few years acquiring digital talent to try to figure out how to get over that gap. And one of the things that we see that's driving this behavior that kind of misunderstands technology is that media companies think that the content is where the value is, okay? And I get yelled at through the internet every time I say this thing. It's without a doubt, people always hate me when I say this. The macroeconomics of content is very clear. Today, there is more content being produced every day by you, the user, than there is being created by the professional media in any year. You produce, as a collective, more content than ever before, and the amount of content that you produce continues to go through the roof. So we learned this from macroeconomics. What happens when supply continues to go up? The average price, the average value continues to go towards zero. And so the challenge that we've run into is what I call flight towards quality, okay? So if you have a quality publication, if you provide a tangible value from a media and content perspective to the customer, then you are on the quality end. If you do not, then you have to figure out some other way to deliver that content without actually asking them to pay for it. So the Wall Street Journal and Bloomberg are examples of companies who actually have done a great job of withstanding the tide of mass content creation, and yet people still pay for it because usually when you're in the financial sector, people are willing to pay money for things that make them more money. But that isn't the case everywhere.
Eric, do you want to comment?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great answer. I think Financial Times has done a very good job. I think that another one of our huge successes is The Guardian. The Guardian has grown their user base enormously, and they've done a fantastic job. And you know, they've opened it up. They're not a paywall-based system, right? And they believe in getting their news out there through every type of format. And we happen to be one of their bigger distribution platforms. And you know, I credit management for taking risk because there's many different approaches. There's the Wall Street Journal approach, which is generally pay for it. And I think that the challenge with it is while it's incredibly lucrative, you know, we're all looking 10 years out. And I think if we, you know, look 10 years out and ask a bunch of the young readers in the room, you know, how many people subscribe to a lot of these kind of high-end publications, and this is where Ben and I both get into trouble with the media, it's a very low number because there are so many sources. And everyone in this room is a publisher with Twitter, with Kakao, with Facebook. And I think that it's, you know, companies like The Guardian, I think, have done a fantastic job. But, you know, take the U.S. newspaper market, for example, it is an utter disaster.
Yeah, I'll give you another example, too. So when Michael Jackson died, within a few hours of his death, we knew very little about how he died. There was a little report about, coroner's report about, you know, he might have overdosed on drugs, things like that. And if you go to Google News and typed in, you saw the top posting for Michael Jackson, there was the Michael Jackson headline that he had died, a little bit of sentence about basically what we knew and everything that we knew, and then 1,800 other articles like this, okay? In other words, there were 1,800 copies of the same story. And I can tell you, 1,799 of those were useless, right? And that's one of the problems that we run in the media is that in the old days, prior to the internet, and almost recently, until recently, media was geographically based. In other words, if you lived in Seoul and you had kind of a barrier, and outside of Seoul, there was somebody else's territory. We fought on a geographic turf. When the internet came about, the turf war started to spread everywhere. Like, you could compete with anybody. The Guardian, which is a publication based in London, in the United Kingdom, is actually gaining ground in the United States. And I can tell you, if you live in the US, you know we hate everything that is not American. And yet, the Guardian is winning. And so this turf war, people forgot that they were fighting this war. And they thought they were in the local media business when they weren't.
Eric, did you want to highlight one of our great stories?
No,
there?
I was going to say, I mean, I think that part of the problem is tradition. One of the things that we actually, when we design Flipboard, we love print. We actually think that the print model from an economic standpoint is fantastic, and the layouts are really good. If I look at Alastair's paper, the Wall Street Journal, everyone here, or maybe in my generation, we are all trained. We know that the most important thing in this paper is going to be in the top left, right? And it's all ranked in order of importance all the way down to the bottom right. And so papers have done a very, very good job of training the reader on, we know what to look for and what's important. I think the problem nowadays is the web doesn't always allow for this kind of beautiful layout and formatting. And
It's whatever Facebook wants to show you in your stream.
That's right.
That's the most important thing.
And whatever you can fit on your, beautiful Samsung Note 3 or your iOS device, it's really hard to lay something out that looks this good. And so I think that there have been some media companies, New York Times is a great example, their app is beautiful. It looks very, very good. The Wall Street Journal app is very beautiful, and I think you guys have done a good job transitioning. It's just a different model, and I think it's working now. The question is, will it continue? And can you get the next generation of readers to say, I will pay you this much per year, when people like The Guardian and folks are printing everything for free, and there's only so much content we can actually consume in a given day. And that's part of the biggest problem it's just the volume now, I think.
Right. Ben, let me ask you about something that I just saw on Circa today, and before this panel, I was getting my staff to try and chase a story, which is, about the terrible ferry sinking, and the development today is that there's been formal charges against the captain and 11 of the crew members. Covering this story for us requires significant investment in sending people down to Jindo in this case, and other places, Mokpo. And one of the kind of grouches, if you like, of the traditional media is that we are the guys that are spending the money getting the story. What's your response to that? I mean, I realize that distribution channels are important to us as well, but I'm in a situation where I see that story on Circa and I think, well,
you did all the work.
We don't have that yet.
Yeah, you did the work, yeah. I'm going to give you an answer that's going to be a little bit funny, a little bit flippant. I'm an entrepreneur. I don't have those resources. It so happens that facts and quotes are not copyrightable, that they're free and available to everybody, no matter who actually got that fact or the quote. And so what we rely on is what is legal, what is ethical, to actually go produce that. At the same time, we want to be in your situation. We actually would love to have the advertising dollars and the resources in order for us to have reporters on the ground to actually go do that. We would rather be the ones creating the exclusive, because then we would get the traffic and we would get the, and let's face it, you guys make a hell of a lot more money than we do, still, even to this day, when we're still republishing the things that you went and got and found. A lot of the times, this is how the industry starts. We start out by using whatever means are available. If you actually look at Hollywood, one of the reasons why Hollywood is based out of LA, not that the town, but like the movie industry is based out of Los Angeles, instead of being on the East Coast of the United States, is that there were twofold. One, there's a lot of sun in LA that you can actually shoot movies, so there's a lot more shooting days. But second, little known history is that out west, it was very difficult to enforce copyright. Hollywood got its start by running away from places where they could be sued for stealing other people's books to turn into movies. And so there was this outlaw mentality. And what we're seeing is something similar on the internet today, which is what can we hold on to in which we can use to create a business? And then we'll figure out how to become more contributory. And in fact, Circa has editors who call and verify sources. And you'll actually see that in the app every once in a while, is Circa called blah, blah, blah. We verify this is true or not true. And so we're figuring out how to do that.
Yeah, I think, our perspective has always been from when we founded Flipboard, we actually had one fundamental belief, which was that we always think that journalism is super, super important, professional journalism. To your point, organizations like yourself, you pay people a lot of money to go out and find these stories, sometimes spending 6 months in another country, going undercover. We're never going to do that. We'd love to get there one day, but it'll be a long time. And I think one of the things that we always tried to do was respect journalism and know that what we were very good at was software design, presenting the contents very beautifully, and frankly, bringing a huge audience. We know how to get an audience. We know how to gather users, and we know how to put it on the screen, and every kind of screen. And so we're good at the technology piece that when we were building the company, we went and talked to a lot of publishers. And they all had one common problem. We went into Time Magazine, and they showed us the layout of Time Magazine in paper, just like I'm sure you guys do every day, where there's a wall with every story and every advertisement that's laid out. And then there was another wall that they had, and that was for the iPad layouts. And then there was another wall that was for iPad in landscape. And then there was another one that was iPhone. And then the guy just looked at us and said, and I don't know what to tell you we're going to do with Android. I have absolutely no idea. And so what we tried to focus on was solving the technology problem that publishers had, because it's very difficult to do, but to really respect journalism and figure out a way to not take your money, but to make you more money. And the other thing we heard from publishers was that everything they put in paper, they might get $1 in ads, but in print and in digital, that went to a dime or pennies, in fact. So what we tried to do was figure out a way of how can we keep making you guys money, still feed ourselves as well, and deliver the reader a great experience while still funding really good professional content. Because at the end of the day, with all due respect to all the reporters in the room, there's professional writers that do a very good job of this, that write great stories that the world needs. And the world would be a very different place if we didn't have professional news agencies and folks like yourself.
Thank you. I guess one of the other questions that we all wrestle with is how to make money out of this business, the news business. We've long had a subscription model that it looked like when we came under new ownership might be going away, and then suddenly it was the best thing we ever did, and we've kept it. And as we were talking about before we came on stage, actually attracting new subscriptions is very hard. Korea is an interesting place now because there's a move. News has always been free here. People have never paid for news here, but there is a change going on where some of the big newspapers are introducing paywalls to their websites, and they're doing it with premium content. And it seems like, it's very interesting for us because we have a Korean website as well. We want to see whether people here are prepared to pay for news. As we try and figure out how to make some money out of the stuff that costs us a lot, because sending people to, say, the Philippines to cover the terrible typhoon there, we had a bunch of people there. We had people down at the ferry sinking. What are your guys' thoughts about how to make money out of the news business?
That's a tough one. We're in a transition period. And so in a transition period, there's a lot of turbulence, and the turbulence causes us to wonder what is actually the right way forward. One of the big problems of news gathering is the cost of gathering news. And I would argue, do you really need to send people to the Philippines, or can you use people who are already on the ground? Do you need professional journalists to give you every single fact, or can you actually crowdsource some of that material? We have not seen the full application of technology to figure out how to actually generate the news that we need to cover. And the type of news that you're talking about is actually a subset of news, which is reporting based on field. It is based on breaking news, based on what is actually happening in the world. And then you see on the opposite end, people who are making money hand over fist, like The Economist, where they don't do any breaking news reporting, and they don't even have bylines. All they do is analysis and thoughtful information, and they still publish a magazine. And so journalism is not a single-threaded industry. It is very diverse, it is very complicated, and in fact, the business models that's going to make one part of journalism work will not be the same one that makes another work.
Eric?
I mean, I think it is tough, as Ben said. I think that the thing that we tried to look at when we built Flipboard was, we frankly think, Mike and I, Mike our CEO and founder, we felt that the internet and mobile especially had gotten really, really, really ugly. And frankly, most ad banners on the internet and in mobile suck. They're just really not that good. Like, if I ask how many of you in the audience have clicked on an ad banner on a website in the last few days? Just out of curiosity, how many have clicked on a web banner?
Nobody's willing to admit it.
Nobody's willing to admit it, right. And so this is a huge problem. And so part of it we felt was the ads, people like good advertising if you can deliver good ads. If I asked you if you bought Vogue magazine on the newsstand, and that magazine had no advertisement in it, I bet you would feel like you didn't get your money's worth. And print did an amazing job of delivering ads that were beautiful and integrated into the content, and they didn't compete with the content. And I think one of the challenges with digital is people have tried to put ads right next to content, and they're not pretty, and people want to read the content, and we should let people focus on the content. So what we've tried to do is separate content from advertising. And in Flipboard, what we try to do is present beautiful full-page ads, ads that look really nice. We've taught brands how to actually build advertising on an iPad, an iPhone, an Android, a Samsung that actually looks pretty. And ironically, in Flipboard, we actually have people that subscribe to our ads. So a brand can actually create a magazine just like a publisher. So you can have an ad that looks like the Wall Street Journal, and what's hard is, as Ben said, it's really tough. But part of it is you have to bring the advertisers and the brands into this world and help teach them what an engaging ad is like. And frankly, they did a great job in magazines. When Louis Vuitton has a beautiful ad with Angelina Jolie, in the Sahara, with her, it's very pretty, and people want to look at it.
It's content.
It's content at the end of the day. And I think that part of it is, all of us have to work with advertisers to help make their ads better. Because at the end of the day, people want to see them, I think.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. For me, at Cheezburger, we're trying to teach our advertisers how to make more entertaining ads. Right? Because one of the challenges that we run into, especially with banner ads, is that it's about distraction, it's about taking your focus away. And we, as a company, embrace native advertising because we realize that our users actually don't care if it's an ad. They actually want better ads. The thing that they don't want is terrible ads. And so if you actually take a survey of consumers and ask them what they want from their advertising, the #1 answer is, make me laugh. Right? And that's right up in our wheelhouse. So when we actually work with advertisers, it's about how do we give you better performance by making your ads better and making it more like content. And we're seeing, at least in the US, the advertising agencies responding really positively to that need.
Great.
Okay, we have about 5 minutes left here, so I'm going to ask you one last question. And then I'm going to see if anybody in the audience would like to ask anything. But it's a prediction time. This thing here, this newspaper, how long is this going to last for? Do you think there's always going to be a market for a newspaper, or is basically the time is limited for this?
Do you have an answer? I have one. All right. So the question is, what happens to formats when time passes them by? So if you think about formats, newspaper is a format, radio is a format, a paper scroll is a format. I ask you, how many of you here have used a scroll recently? One person maybe? You guys are all liars, okay? You know why? When you look at a receipt that's been printed, that is a scroll. My point is, old formats that have been popularized never go away. They just become very specialized. So my answer to you is, it will not go away. It'll become something very specialized. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think it will go. I think the numbers will dramatically decrease. I think.
Wait, but everybody uses scrolls now, though.
Yeah, right. I think it's a tough one. I think that technology is getting better and better, and you've seen the promise of flexible displays. And who knows, we may have that paper in a very digital type of form. I mean, there's something nice about a paper. We all agree. And in fact, it's funny when we see people reading on Flipboard, we see things like Sunday morning is a big spike time because people, and that's a spike time for the iPad. And it's to some people, to the younger generation, that's sitting down on Sunday morning and having your cup of coffee with your iPad is just as comfy as that crinkly paper sound you get. But I think 10 years from now, it's a different ballgame altogether. I think there's too many different formats that are coming, but it will never go away. I don't think, but I think the numbers will dramatically decrease.
And that's something that we have to deal with. Okay, do we have any questions from the floor? Does anyone want to? Yeah, gentleman over there.
Thank you for the inspiring talk. My name is Mauro Pelosi from Finland. Actually, I want to ask if you see an analogy in the convergence of user-generated news and professional journalism and what happened with Wikipedia and Encyclopedia Britannica. Okay, so you see if there is an analogy in this kind of trends in printed high-quality content and also in journalism. Thank you so much.
So in terms of the question is, what is the analogy between user-generated content and news and other content that's been created? UGC does not replace professional content, at least not its entirety. It may replace maybe a lower end or something else, but UGC is not a replacement. If you ask CNN, they try to do a project called iReport, and essentially what they were trying to do is create reporters out of their audiences. And I bet you they spend an inordinate amount of money trying to take the stories that their users have created and make it useful for their website. They have other editors, they fact check, they do a bunch of other work. UGC and news are complementary. That it is a tool for news to use to make better news, faster news, better experiences, more engaging, more accessible, but it will not replace one another, just as we will never replace an existing format that's already been popularized.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it's UGC content is not a replacement for professional journalism. If we had actually believed that, Flipboard never would have gone after the professional news houses. And what's the first thing that we did when we built Flipboard was we went after every high quality magazine and newspaper and tried to bring them onto the platform. And what we do see is, and we actually don't have a platform yet for UGC content, but we do see people promoting things like their Tumblr blog, and there's some really good folks out there, there's no question. But at the end of the day, when you sit down to read, you want to read a financial analysis of something, you're going to trust somebody from the Wall Street Journal or from the New York Times. You might not bet your stock investment on, maybe he's a genius in college that does a better analysis, but you don't trust it yet.
Does he own that stock? Has he disclosed it? Does he have an ethical history? Like, you never know those things.
Yeah, and journalism has all those rules built in, right? Papers know what you can and can't say. And I think that's what I said earlier. I think we absolutely need that professional journalism always, but UGC will only help support it, I think.
Okay, I think we have time for one more, maybe. Yeah, gentleman jumping up and down over there.
한국말로 하려고 하는데 지금 괜찮으실까요?
Yeah, go ahead.
Guys can hear?
Yep, I hear it.
전 질문을 한 두 가지로 질문을 해서 드리고 싶은데요. 아까 말씀하셨듯이 이제 정보는 어디에서든지 만들어지고 여기 있는 모든 사람들이 정보를 만들 수 있다는 것인데 그 말은 이제 듣는 사람보다 저희가 정보를 필요로 하는 사람보다 정보의 수가 많아지는 거 아닙니까? 그러면은 그런 상황에서 어떻게 나에게 가장 최적한 정보가 나에게 올 수 있게 해줄 수 있을까라는 게 첫 번째 질문이고 두 번째 질문은 그 나에게 온 정보가 최적화돼서 온 정보가 이게 정말 공신력 있고 확실한 정보인지 어떻게 걸러낼 수 있는가 이 두 가지가 큰 질문이고요. 마지막에 또 한 가지가 생각났는데 아까 말씀해 주셨는데 이제 광고가 컨텐츠로 된다는 얘기는 굉장히 필요로 하는 사람에게 맞는 광고를 제공한다는 뜻인데 그렇게 하면은 수많은 광고들을 따로 만들어 가지고 그 right person들한테 제공을 해야 되는데 그렇게 됐을 때 드는 비용과 그 광고주가 지불하는 그 가격의 차이 때문에 어떤 손실이라든지 이런 것들이 더 떨어질 수 있는 가능성이 높아지는 게 아닌가 하는 그렇게 세 가지 질문을 좀 드리고 싶습니다. 두 분께서는 1번과 2번을 어떻게 서비스에 지금 반영하고 계신지 약간 좀 궁금합니다. 좀 프랙티컬하게 좀 얘기해 주셨으면 감사하겠습니다.
Yeah. So okay. So I heard
wanna-
that. So I'm gonna try to wrap up all three of your questions into one thing. Okay. The question is: there's a lot of content. Who do you trust? How do you know this is good? And how do you know that advertising and personalization doesn't influence all that? So I'm gonna kind of try to wrap this whole thing up if I can. Advertising will become more personalized, not because of human beings, but because of algorithms. Software is getting better and better at becoming more human-like. But there is a challenge to that because advertising still requires an economy of scale. You still need to reach millions of people for an advertiser to be really interested in that market. In terms of credibility, I think you're going to see lots of combinations between software, artificial intelligence, and human beings crowdsourcing to help people figure out what is and isn't credible. And I'll leave you with this one thought. We are covering more and more of our visual field with pixels. You're staring at them right now. You're staring at the screen. I'm actually staring at a wall full of them in the back. And what we're going to do is we're going to see more and more of our visual field covered by pixels. You will actually create more time in the future to consume more media in a faster, better way. So I think machines and software and artificial intelligence are bound to start to get involved in our consumption patterns within the next 3 years. It's basically too much ads, too much content. Who do we trust?
Yeah, I mean, I think when it comes to the fine balance, one of the things we learned at Flipboard early on was don't clutter every page of content with advertising because people tend to ignore it. And if you're selective about how you present it and where you present it, that's one big lesson that we learned. Second thing, to your comment on computers and algorithms, I think one of the things that we've learned is algorithms. I mean, everyone in Silicon Valley believes algorithms can solve any problem in the world. Algorithms can fix anything. Humans can fix a lot, right? Human editors are really great. One of the things that we did at Flipboard was hire one of the editors of Time magazine. So Josh Quittner is in his 50s. He's the old gray-haired guy at Flipboard, and he is all about integrating human editorial into both the presentation of the content on Flipboard and really giving Flipboard, when we have this giant stream of all this content and news that's coming in, actually algorithms can pick some of them, but then Josh and his team of 15 editors will manually pick stories and surface those to the top. So we rely on both humans and editors, and we still mostly focus our advertising on only serving it into the professional content. So
yeah, and the irony is Circa and Cheezburger both actually do not really use any algorithms in a meaningful way, at least yet. And I still think that human beings will stay at the top of the food chain,
Yep.
but algorithms will continue to figure out how to get better and better to assist the human decision making.
We tend to go from algorithms can serve up a whole list of stories that then an editor can pick. And that's very helpful rather than the editor having to pick from everything. So I think humans never go away in this business.
So you're saying there's still a job for me in 10 years' time?
I think you're good.
Okay, thank you.